Okay, for Lauren and Gabby, hello, hope all is well. Um, okay, this week for your poetry, so we're going to lay aside the thank you, please. Okay, thank you. Thank you. It's kind of a joke. Very small joke. I had you read Tennyson. If I am not mistaken, we were reading Alfred Lord Tennyson.
Do you need to steal mine?
I do need to steal your words.
I made sure I brought it in case you need to steal it.
Thank you. I do have, they're all on my computer, but I don't want to mess up. I don't know if I can bring things up while I'm recording, and also I'm cheap. And then if I just steal one of yours, that's one less I have to print and less paper. Okay. I am going to read these. The first one. Break, break, break on thy cold gray stones, O sea, and I would that my tongue could utter the thoughts that arise in me. Oh, well for the fisherman's boy that he shouts with his sister at play. Oh, well for the sailor lad that he sings in his boat on the bay. And the stately ships go on to their haven under the hill. But oh, for the touch of a vanished hand and the sound of a voice that is still. Break, break, break the foot of thy crags, O sea, but the tender grace of a day that is dead will never come back to me. What's going on with him?
Think he lost someone at sea? I mean, that's how it makes me feel, like he lost someone at sea and now he despises the sea.
This is it. I thought
That's a reasonable explanation.
I feel like he did the touch of a vanished hand and the sound of a voice that is still. There's a vanished hand and a voice that is still in his life, and it's gone.
Maybe he was at sea with a friend and his friend drowned.
Perhaps.
I had read, what is it called? The Shakespeare play with Viola or whatever I'm talking about. And her twin brother.
Yes, As You Like It? Or Twelfth
Probably.
Night. I can't ever remember because they both have
I think it's the 12th night.
Okay.
Anyways, and I had just read that the same night that I read the poem. And so it just kind of reminded me exactly like it of when she lost her brother and how she felt. And then I read the poem and I was like, huh, seems pretty similar. So
Yes.
that was my correlation.
That's a good insight. Why do you think he comments on the fisherman's boy and the sailor in the boat?
Because they're all happy at sea, but he's not. He's jealous.
They're either happy at sea or happy in life,
Mm.
and he's not. You know, we've talked some about meter, da 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 da, or da 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 da. What kind of meter is break, break, break?
Da, da, da.
Yes, every single one. It's actually got a name. It's called spondaic. They're spondies. Obviously, they don't get used very much because if you wrote a poem where every single syllable was, that would be very tiresome.
But with the little
yeah,
break.
because I can hear the crash against the rocks, and it's almost like every crash is just reminding him, they're gone, the person's gone. It's very sad. To that, I don't know that Tennyson is known for his sad poetry necessarily, but I also gave you one called Crossing the Bar, which I'm going to read. Sunset and evening star and one clear call for me, and may there be no moaning of the bar when I put out to sea. But such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full for sound and foam, when that which drew from out the boundless deep turns again home. Twilight and evening bell, and after that the dark, and may there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. For though from out our bourne of time and place the flood may bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar. What's it about?
I'm going out to sea once the sun sets.
Okay. What?
He's going across the sea to meet someone in a
Okay.
different country.
Why do you think the word pilot is capitalized?
Because it's personal.
Is it my pilot? I hope to see my pilot.
The Lord? I don't know.
The pilot,
If
like
the Lord is my pilot, where is he going?
heaven.
Sunset and evening star and one clear call for me, and may there be no moaning of the bar when I put out to sea. He says he wants the sea to be calm when he sets out. What other things happen when your surroundings moan and groan? When people around you moan and groan.
Well, if it's your funeral, people would be moaning and groaning.
It's your
around you.
funeral, people are moaning and groaning. Sunset, evening star, twilight, evening bell. It's the end of the day. It's the end. I'm coming close to the end.
It's almost as confusing as those Shakespeare poems.
He wants He wants peace and quiet about him as he embarks. May there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. You know, for some reason, and I'm assuming you probably are familiar with this, if you're not, sorry, but the very end of The Lord of the Rings when they go into the West. When Bilbo and they go, and because obviously into the West is heaven. I mean, technically not in the Silmarillion, but for us, you know, they're leaving the world we know and going to a different one. They're sailing into the West, and it always makes me think of the Grey Havens and sailing into the
Aslan's
West.
land.
But yes, or yes, Reepicheep going to Aslan's country, exactly. Is that Tennyson didn't only write poems about people dying, I promise. And despite the fact that The Charge of the Light Brigade also involved a fair number of people dying.
The Charge of the Light Brigade, though, has a different sort of, I guess, feel to it.
It does.
It's not like, I lost someone, I'm
No.
so sad. It's more of a like, oh, these poor people.
Well, it's partly these poor people, but is that the complete vibe? Like what sort of vibe do you get when you read that poem?
What was the commander thinking?
Well, yeah, see, not even for me, because I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the last stanza. Okay, I'm going to read the last two stanzas. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell, all that was left of them, left of 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made, all the world wondered. Honor the charge they made, honor the Light Brigade, noble 600. Do you feel
So they were
sorry for them? I feel like, whoa, courageous. They did their duty in the face of all odds. Honor them.
Even though they all died for no purpose, really.
Unfortunately, yes, which sometimes happens in war.
There was a movie, I think it's called Blindside. We watched it, and it's about this person, and like he wrote an essay about that poem,
Oh.
and he was like, I mean, we listen to the people in command of us because, I mean, they're in our command, but do they really know what's best for us?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he wrote an essay about that poem, so it kind of reminds me of that. It's like,
about the football movie, The Blind Side.
Yeah.
Maybe he is, because I haven't seen it. Does the character write it?
Is it about like a black football player?
yeah.
Okay, then it's probably the
Whatever
same
his
movie.
name,
okay.
I forgot.
I've never seen it, so.
His name's Michael Orr. He writes an essay. What?
Yeah, I don't remember that part. All I remember to them is
that's
is
a
them
little
playing.
side
They
that's
wanted
not
to.
part of
He
the
wanted to
plot.
play chess like with his he was adopted into a family, and then with his would-be new brother, they were playing chess, but they didn't have a chessboard, so they were taking out like the salt and pepper and like a glass
They
of
weren't playing
olive
chess.
oil.
They were going over plays.
Oh, I think they were. See, the last time I
they
played.
were calling them.
Everybody has a different version of this movie. It's
The
fascinating.
last time I saw that
It's
movie, I was
really
probably
interesting.
6 years old. So.
They all live in Texas, so
They took all the spices and they were, cause he
Bless
grew
you.
up like fight to survive because he grew up in like drug houses. His mom was a drug addict and he got taken away from his mom because she couldn't take care of him anymore. So he got adopted into that and didn't know how to live. So he got into football because he's like 6'8", 350 pounds. Of course he's gonna play football. And so they were going over plays
you're
and he
talking
wasn't
about me?
understanding them. Are you 350 pounds? And you're 6'5", not 6'8". And
Almost.
Shh, let him tell the story, Carl.
and so
Jane
they were
Austen's
taking
waiting.
They were taking spices out of the cabinet and they're like, oh. So they were using them and they were throwing them across the table as they were running. So they were moving them around to like who would block who, and then he would slide them across the table, be like he would run. And then they were saying like, oh, Mr. Spice just scored a touchdown.
I feel like I would be even slightly less good at that than I would be in actual chess. Okay.
It's a great movie.
All right. Well, interesting. So you had a brush with this poem before. So my children had a brush with this poem. I didn't bring this book last week, did I? The Charge of the Mouse Brigade?
Nope.
Did I mention it? I'm not going to read this entire picture book to you. So,
It's a
I'm
picture
sorry.
book?
Yeah, it's got little mice are so cute.
Those are my type of books.
Okay, so the plot of this is that the cats have stolen their cheese.
Mice are
Why?
good for
I don't
forever.
know. It's a kid's book. And so, and they have the little mice are dressed up like soldiers. I love mice. I love mice. I would keep them just as.
3 times.
And they ride little like ferrets or weasels. Okay, so anyway, there's a mouse soldier, and later in his old age, he decides to write down the wonderful exploits of the Mouse Brigade when they rescued the cheese. And I have to read it because how often do I get a chance to read this book? Do you think? Once every 4 years when I teach this class. Okay. Half an inch, half an inch, half an inch onward into the Valley of Cats rode the 600. Forward the Mouse Brigade, capture the cheese, invade. Into the Valley of Cats rode the 600. Was there a mouse afraid in all that Mouse Brigade? Yes, but they made the raid. Onward they thundered. Cats to the right of them, cats to the left of them, cats to the front of them. Mice were outnumbered. Crashed through the fields and trees. Mice stormed cats' armories. Captured the cheddar cheese. Noble 600. They pelted them with jelly beans, the cats.
Jelly beans hurt.
You throw anything fast enough and it hurts.
We didn't throw them. We shot them out of a BB gun.
Oh,
We had airsoft
man.
battles, and they're like, okay, we're done shooting
Oh,
pellets.
those hurt.
That was piercing skin. So we modified them to where you could fit a jelly bean into it, and you would just see a red dot fly across your face.
Now,
It was a great time.
my kids have various, airsoft guns of various ilks, and once we looked out the back window and one of them had not followed the directions of the game properly and he was being executed at close range. He was down on the ground and I'm not proud of this. I don't know what I've done to my children, but these are
I remember
children.
one time I was playing paintball. I got up to run to get better cover. My brother lit up my back so hard.
Dude, paintball hurt.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
They're
there was
okay.
a hilarious picture,
You ever gotten
It
hit
was
by
like-
frozen paintball?
No, I bet
a
that
picture of
hurts.
like a whole bunch of stormtroopers in a line, and they're all like in their white armor and clean, and it says, like a squad of stormtroopers after a fun day of paintball.
Oh, yes.
Because they can't hit anything.
Okay, so
They
from
can't.
paintball and airsoft and jelly beans, all the way creeping our way back to the topic. I have given you a new poem. It is something completely different. It is by Robert Browning, husband of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, whom you read, the author of How Do I Love Thee, Let Me Count the Ways, and the sonnets from the Portuguese, the one about, you've given me flowers, and I'm giving you back the flowers, but the flowers are my thoughts out of my heart, and they're still attached to my, does this kind of ring a bell? Remember? This is her husband, Robert Browning.
I was
My
like, why is
last-
this familiar?
My Last Duchess is one of his most famous poems. I love this poem, but it's a bit creepy, and it tells a story. It is not a celebration of nature, or it's a character portrait of a person. And I don't want to say any more than that because I want you to read it and I want you to come back and tell me what sort of person this is. He is speaking. That is all I'm going to say about that. I have new advice for ladies of the 19th century who want to be, especially
No.
classy. Oh, yes.
No.
Okay, so
Last week you read about visiting. I loved, my favorite part of that is airing the bed every day.
What does that mean?
Taking all the sheets and bedding off the bed and draping them out the windows or across the chairs to air out. No. Not happening in my house
Some of
or
the things they did
ever.
back then are just like,
Everyone in the
Course. They
every-
don't have a washing machine to stick them in.
well, yeah, but airing them out.
And you might not smell
Sounds
as good as we
fresh.
smell.
Too much work though.
Yeah, and
Everyone
then
in
like what
Emma
are the
has way
bugs,
too
like
much free time.
the moths or the spiders?
Well, but we're
that crawl
focusing on a
them?
certain class
Yeah.
of people, aren't we?
Yeah.
The upper class. So your handy advice for the week is conversation. And I just want to read through, on the off chance that there might be somebody here who doesn't read these. I can't imagine that could be the case, but
Never.
on the off chance that that could happen in someone's life, I'm just going to read just a part of this. Conversation is the verbal interchange of thoughts and feelings. To form a perfect conversationist, many qualifications are requisite. There must be knowledge of the world, knowledge of books, and a facility of imparting knowledge with originality, memory, an intuitive perception of what is best to say and best to omit, good taste, good temper, good manners. Right, now I'm starting to think I've never met a perfect conversationist ever that has all these qualifications.
especially now, because people are like,
People don't know how to talk.
When
Oh,
you
yeah,
argue
oh, yeah,
about
so they're
something.
mean. Interestingly, I love this one thing. That you should be able to go from topic to topic easily. And not, she says, dwell so long upon one subject as to weary the attention of the hearers. Persons laboring under a monomania, they only talk about one thing, are never pleasant talkers. Do you know anyone like that? Do you have a friend that just doesn't want to talk about anything but one thing?
Yes.
Yes.
My
The
father.
worst.
Or like
They're not perfect.
Or
No,
they talk
Mrs.
about
Bates.
something really
Miss Bates
negative.
talks about everything.
Like it's just negative always.
All right, I'm not
she
gonna.
also likes talking about Jane
I guess
A
it
lot.
could
Oh,
kind
yes.
of be
a
me.
lot.
Sometimes when I get hyper focused on something that I really enjoy talking about, but otherwise, only after those situations do
So
I.
this paper will tell me how to be a proper lady.
If you, but
We watched
hopefully you do not want to.
we watched the movie.
But then again, anything that can be applied to a woman
Hey,
must
Carl.
Yeah, we watched the new movie, and so I know how the book ends.
Oh,
but
okay.
It really helps because now I can follow the story a lot better.
Well, it's
Well,
not
like,
been
you
hard
can
to
imagine it
follow,
better.
has it?
New one's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah. I was having a real hard time, like
Oh, really?
knowing, like following the storyline. But now that I've seen the movie, like I can
It
read through the
helps.
book and I
Really?
know what's
'Cause my
going
mom
on
and I were reading it
because
together.
I've watched the movie.
What do you think was the problem? Just out of curiosity, what made it difficult to follow?
I mean,
Are there too
It
many
was
characters, or?
Like you said, I
The
mean, stuff
name-
happens obviously, but it's just that normally in a lot of books there's like major events like Tale of Two Cities. There's major events that your
Yes.
mind can cling
Yeah.
onto as
Okay,
ideas.
There
okay.
wasn't
But
a
in this
whole
book,
lot
it's just this
No.
steady state of really nothing, and once in a while, a little something
Yeah,
will happen.
Frank Churchill
yeah,
comes.
nothing.
Jane Fairfax comes.
Yeah, there was, and mainly I watched the movie before anything really happened, like Frank or Jane.
Okay.
So I watched the movie
Okay.
before all that,
Well,
so.
don't release any information if you're ahead, you know where this is going. Although, in another week, you're probably going to see the direction that it's going if you don't already know.
Can
I-
we just say,
Yes.
Emma is just like a heart rate monitor? It's flat until it fluctuates.
Well, hopefully your heart rate monitor isn't flat. If it is, it's probably not fluctuating much.
Maybe if you're an elephant.
Very early in this week's reading, you found out that Emma, the one who knows everything and can do no wrong, is totally wrong about Mr. Elton.
Yeah.
No clue. She was just dim and blind. That she did not notice everything he did was for her. And she was just shoving Harriet in there. And poor Harriet's like, you know everything, Miss Woodhouse. You know you can do no wrong. Everybody around Emma, you can do no wrong. You're completely wrong. Yeah, Matthew.
Isn't that, and I might have misread this in the book, when they were doing the painting, when Mr. Elton was painting a portrait of...
That was Emma.
Yeah, Emma was painting the portrait,
Emma.
yes.
Emma was painting...
Harriet.
She thought he was obsessing over the painting with Harriet, when in reality he was just obsessed with her painting.
Yes, that she can do it. So he wants to frame it because she painted it. He gives them riddles, and the real courtship. And
Give
she
a
even
riddle to the
she
person who
even
can
at one
figure
point
it
says
out.
to Harriet, if he was too serious about it right now, he wouldn't have done it in front of me. In fact, he kind of pushed it towards me instead of towards you. It's because it was for you, Emma. You don't see what's going on, even though her and I don't know if I read this part last week. Her brother-in-law said, you need to be careful there, that I think that he is more interested in you than you think. Let me see if I can find that. It might be in.
Emma has the mindset. It's like, some people nowadays, like, you're so deep set in your mindset that you can't really tell when stuff is not going how
Yes.
you think it is.
We can convince, if we decide something is true, don't you think that it's very hard to unconvince us that it's true?
Mm-hmm.
Despite all the evidence to the contrary? We're just,
It definitely
this is the
sounds
way it
like
is.
Christianity.
What
A lot of people don't
It sounds
what
like
is
college.
isn't it
believe that.
the Edgar Allan Poe quote? It's easier to lie to someone than convince someone they've been lied to.
oh, that's a good quote.
Maybe it was Mark Twain. I don't know.
I have no idea, but it's a good quote. Yeah, it's very hard to convince someone. So there's this interchange between Emma and Mr. John Knightley, her brother-in-law. And he warns her, I think Mr. Elton is interested in you.
And she's like,
And and
No.
it says this, she says, I thank you, but I assure you, you are quite mistaken. Mr. Elton and I are very good friends and nothing more. She walked on, amusing herself in the consideration of the blunders which often arise from a partial knowledge of circumstance, of the mistakes which people of high pretensions to judgment are forever falling into. Who's got high pretensions to judgment? Emma. And she's chuckling over the mistakes that sort of people fall into. Sweetheart, you're in the mistake. You've made the mistake already. She is not the mistake. I hear that.
She may have good vision, but she's entirely blind.
Yes, that is well said. She is blind, perhaps by her own sureness that she's right.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that, like we talked about last week, that she's been surrounded by people her whole life who tell her she's right and she can do no wrong, except Mr. Knightley.
So, like,
Go ahead.
Everyone jump out the window.
That's on the screen.
sorry, I lost
I think ice keeps falling.
burning
I
down
lost
right
my
now.
train of thought.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you remember it last week, not this past week, but the week before, I gave you a paper on being a gentleman, how to be a gentleman. And part of that was always putting people at ease, knowing what to talk about,
Not
but
rocking the boat.
not rocking the boat and making people feel comfortable. And you remember when we left off talking last week and when you had started reading, they're heading to Randall's for this Christmas Eve dinner. And Mr. John Knightley does not do social events, right? Hates it. Why would anyone go out in the bad weather? Seriously, why don't we just stay home? So he's irritated. Mr. Elton, on the flip side, is inexplicably happy even though Harriet has a cold,
It's
because he
like-
gets to spend the evening with Emma. Emma just doesn't realize it. So he should look more sedate. Mr. John Knightley should look a little happier about being there. And the very first paragraph of chapter 14 says this: some change of countenance was necessary for each gentleman as they walked into Mrs. Weston's drawing room. Mr. Elton must compose his joyous looks, and Mr. John Knightley disperse his ill humor. Have you ever gone to a social event where you just didn't feel it? Like you
Yes.
just were, I don't want to be around people right now and talk to them.
Yep.
But you've probably been at a social event where there's someone like that and they're just,
They're just like that.
and they
Me.
bring everybody down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can have a good time because this person is so glum.
You can feel totally your mood and act like a imbecile. We can dance. We can dance.
Oh, no.
Everybody's taking
I
their
hate
chance.
that
So
song.
bad. My dad plays it too much.
My kids play it to taunt me. On the flip side, maybe the most exciting thing that ever happened to you has just happened. And you want to go and you just want to blurt it out to everyone, but then you'll turn into that person who just obsesses and talks about only one thing and bores. Okay, you're
Everybody.
really excited and happy, but not everyone else
No, everybody
cares
else, like,
that
cares.
much.
Yeah.
So, you know, these two gentlemen, Mr. Elton has his faults, Mr. John Knightley has his faults, but they know that when you go into a social situation, we have to temper our emotions. And I
But
feel like,
they
do
don't.
you think we do that as much today? Do you think people let their emotions hang out a little bit more?
Yeah.
Is that good or bad?
Some people, I mean, some people in some situations, definitely, yes, they express their emotions a lot more, but like, it's more like people express their emotions very heavily, like they'll, like, express them to everyone in a very
Mhm.
clear way. Or you get the flip side where, people don't express their emotions at all. Like, they won't express, like, in that case, like, John Knightley should look more content, even though he's not really.
Mm-hmm.
People don't really do that either. It's more of a, I shouldn't be expressing the emotion I have, so I won't express any
Okay.
emotion at all.
Like Jane Fairfax,
Yeah.
who everybody complains is so Jane Fairfax just doesn't show a lot of emotion, generally. Yeah, that's a good, Karsten, that's a good observation. I feel like most people, though, we kind of let our emotions really hang out to the detriment of everyone around us. And I guess it's politeness, isn't it? It's do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
That or self-pity.
That or self-pity.
And then
And
it's-
eliciting pity from others.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because when you do that and you're hoping people will come and say, oh, I'm so sorry, let's talk about your problems, when that's not what we're here to do. And I'm not saying, obviously, don't ever tell somebody your problem, but that we all need to be buttoned up but it's interesting that we've changed and we just think it's okay to just gush our emotions out all over
And-
everybody else, but it's not always appropriate. Go ahead.
The deal with, this book is like, what you were saying last week, like, people's emotions tend to show when they're hanging out with the people they hang out all the time. So it's like, I mean, their emotions are showing, I would say, for me, my emotions show a lot more when I'm at home than when I'm here in class.
Which is where it's appropriate. And so Emma has Mr. Knightley. They're very open. Like if one of them's upset, they're not going to be afraid to show it. And Mr. Knightley does show it. He's disgusted with Frank Churchill, or he's disgusted about something else, and he's not afraid. But I don't think he would do that in front of anybody. He'll do it in front of Emma, because they have that sort of relationship. So Mr. Elton gushes out this kind of tipsy proposal to Emma, which shocks the socks off of her. She's probably not wearing socks, but if she were, they'd be shocked off, because she was not
Well, it's
seeing
winter,
that
so
coming.
she might
Oh
wear
yeah, some sort of stockings.
She was
And
probably more or less wearing stockings.
stockings. She's disgusted on 2 counts. One is because she thought he liked Harriet. And the way she read it was he was paying all this attention to Harriet, and how could he be so fickle as to turn his attentions to her? But there was one more reason. This is her mental, this is her train of thought, that he should talk of encouragement, that she encouraged him, should consider her as aware of his views, accepting his attentions, meaning, in short, to marry him, should suppose himself her equal in connection or mind, to look down upon her friend, so well understanding the gradations of rank below him, and be so blind as to what rose above, as to fancy himself showing no presumption in addressing her. It was most provoking. Mr. Elton, Harriet, you look down on Harriet like she's beneath you, and you think you're an equal to me? I guess my question is Emma any better than Mr. Elton?
No, she looks down on Harriet and thinks she's better than everybody.
She looks down on Mr. Elton too. I mean, she's like, well, I look down on Harriet, and Harriet would be perfect for Mr. Elton, so by relation, she's looking down on both of them.
She's not taking responsibility by shifting the blame
Okay.
situation onto him.
Which we know she does. We talked about last week the fact that she never finishes her portraits.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was, well, they won't sit still, and you know how hard it is to get children to sit still, and my sister wouldn't sit still, and she always has a reason why she doesn't finish things and doesn't do things. So yes, it's everyone else's fault. It's not her fault, but she's equally, if not more, class conscious as Mr. Elton. You know, saying, yeah, Harriet, she's a nice girl and everything, but yeah, I could do better than that.
You.
Yeah, you. And she says, yeah. She looks at Mr. Elton and says, I can do better than that.
Mr. Elton wants to, I guess, marry up, and
Yes.
And Emma does not want to marry down.
Remember, Mr. Knightley said that when Mr. Elton is alone with the guys, that he made it very clear he would marry up. Like, I will marry someone of a substantial fortune, and
Which he eventually does.
Which he eventually does. I'm not going to throw myself away. And in the next week's reading, you're going to get an earful of Mrs. Elton.
Ugh.
Ugh.
I watched the movie, and she's like,
So next
She's
week we're
even
reading
worse
to
in the
what
book,
chapter?
if that's possible.
What chapter will we be reading to?
Well, let's go ahead and talk about that. I think we read up through 28, is that right?
27.
27. Read up through chapter 42. So, Emma, and I would like to say that I'm never ever like Emma. I'm certainly not of a high social class, and I hope I don't look down on people. But there is a trait in Emma that I feel like I can sympathize with, and it is this. She comes back, and of course, she's mortified for a couple of reasons. First of all, because
she doesn't want to marry.
she doesn't want to marry him, and it was embarrassing. But second of all, because she has blown Harriet's hopes up so high. And she's going to have to tell her, you know, I had you refuse the guy who really liked you. And I got your hopes all high, and it's not happening. And she says this. This is not the trait that I think I identify with yet, but she does do a very good thing. She says this: the first error and the worst lay at her door. It was foolish, it was wrong to take so active a part in bringing any two people together. It was adventuring too far, assuming too much, making light of what ought to be serious, a trick of what ought to be simple. She was quite concerned and ashamed, and resolved to do such things no more. And of course, in the next paragraph, then she starts to let her imagination run away with her in figuring out who would be good for Harriet. But here's what she says a couple pages later. She tells Harriet, Harriet's crying. She says she actually sort of feels at that point that Harriet was the superior creature of the two, and that to resemble her would be more for her own welfare and happiness than all that genius and intelligence could do.
So she's saying Harriet's better
Yes.
than her.
It was rather too late in the day to set about being simple-minded and ignorant, but she left her with every previous resolution confirmed of being humble and discreet, of repressing imagination all the rest of her life. That's it. I'm never, ever, ever, ever going to let my imagination run away with me again. I'm totally reformed. Is this going to last?
No.
Oh no, oh no. But I guess it's the
She has
New Year's resolution thing, you know, I'm never gonna do that
Because
again.
it was around New Year's.
Yes, and what's the first thing you do? That thing. We fall back into it. And so she's got this resolution. I will never let my imagination run away with me ever again. Emma, that's not you. You have to work according to the personality you have, you know. You're not going to do that. Do you guys ever do that? Like, I'm never, ever, ever going to do fill
like
in the
again,
blank?
and then you do it like 5 minutes
Oh,
later.
yeah. Oh, yeah. What were you going to say, Jacob?
Well, we have a new president.
Oh, yay.
Actually, yeah,
You know what?
yeah.
Okay, well, never mind. I won't make
Say it.
political.
How much
I was
more?
just going to say, I really don't care. I mean, I care, I guess, but presidents just can't do very much in our country. I don't know why everybody's so hyped up about. It doesn't matter. It matters. Congress really matters, though. One party taking control of Congress and railroading legislation through, that matters. That's what we should be. But who's at the helm? Really, they're not at the helm, so I'm just not real. I just can't get real. Like, everybody was like, oh, we're mourning because Clinton got elected. Oh, we're mourning because Obama got elected. You know?
I had a friend that posted after Trump left, he's like, well, the U.S. just lost the best president ever. And I was like,
Well, in fairness,
Trump was.
if he kept his mouth shut a little bit more, maybe he. Do you know what I mean? Let's be honest. Anyway, okay.
I saw a meme after his Twitter got blocked. There was a meme of him going up to a kid and be like, hey, can I use your Twitter? It was
There
hilarious.
was a funny thing my mom saw on Facebook. It was like, remember in The Lion King when Scar cheats his way to the
No.
proverbial throne, and then the land gets infested with hyenas, and everything that the lions worked so hard to build got destroyed. I'm not implying anything, I'm just asking. It's like,
Well, I'm not.
2020?
I'm not a big
One.
current events follower because, and this is the, and then we'll go back to Emma, but because I'm sure you just really can't wait to go back to Emma. I can see it on all your faces. Because see, we're here trying to talk about things that last and matter, and we don't know what of today's news is important and what's not. It's just a lot of information, and it's going to be years before we know what's important and what's not. And I guess I feel like I want to spend my time on things that I know turned out to be important and not stuff that may or may not be. Anyway, but you are
learning is important.
very, very free to disagree with me. Okay, so back to Mr. Elton. And by the way, I'm just going to take this digression to give you guys a little pep talk. Did I pep talk you last week? Did I give you my wintertime pep talk?
Yes.
Okay, this is my Emma pep talk. Probably none of you are enjoying this book. Maybe one of you is. I don't know.
I mean, I'm starting to.
Now that you kind of got it,
the movie
okay,
really
yes.
helps me start to enjoy it.
But, and after this book, we are going to read Moby Dick. We are going to read Moby Dick.
That has more excitement.
Okay, but don't get too excited
It's
because
long.
it's very long and it can be tiresome. There are many adults who say, you know what, I've sat down and I've tried to read Moby Dick multiple times, I can't do it. Can't do it. And here's what I want you to get from this time with me because we're going to spend 5 weeks on Moby, 6 weeks on Moby, 7 weeks?
When I look at the books, they're about the same thickness as Emma,
Oh,
so
mine's like
Okay.
800 pages
We
long.
maybe
have-
it's a little thicker.
Yeah.
We have a version of Moby Dick, and my mom is like, oh my gosh, that is horrible. Because our version of Moby Dick literally looks like a textbook. It's like,
Is it a
This
couple
size?
words
Oh,
together?
but maybe it has all kinds of notes and stuff.
I don't know.
See, I wish mine had
But-
notes. Anyway,
yeah.
point being, like, some people love Jane Austen, some people don't. Some people think Moby Dick is just the greatest book ever. I'm sort of on the fence about Moby Dick. I'm hoping you guys can bring out some questions I
You
have
some
when we
more
read it.
for Emma,
But,
right?
yeah, but
Okay.
anyway, even if you read something you're not enjoying or you think this isn't really changing my life, you are changing your life. by persevering. All right? Perseverance is a virtue because sometime in your life you're going to have to do something else you just don't want to do. And maybe it's your employment, maybe it's parenting, maybe, you know, like there's going to be something and you're just going to have to, you know, bite the bullet, as they say, and move forward and do it. And so, I mean, I don't want you to feel that way about this class. Like, but, and I'll be totally honest, the modern world, the rise of the modern world, this is my least favorite year.
Why?
Because I like Greece and Rome. I like the Middle Ages. It's exciting, it's interesting to me. The closer we get to the modern world, the less I enjoy it. This is true confessions, all right? So if you're thinking, oh, Mrs. Ferguson just loves this and she just reads Jane Austen, no, she doesn't. But we can learn to persevere and stick to it, okay? So it's January, it's cold, but let's become better people, become more virtuous by our perseverance.
New Year's resolution.
Are we feeling? That wasn't really a St. Crispin's Day speech, was it? I needed to get up and really wave flags and stuff, and if I wanted to be good at this.
These words I had on St. Crispin's Day.
This headache I had from Emma. Okay, so we, assuming all of you are like me, we live in the Quad Cities. It's a big, I mean, it's not a big city, but you know what I mean. It's not.
It's a big suburb.
It's not a tiny town.
Countryside is the best side.
Well,
Yes.
but so we know a lot of people, right? We go places. Well, I mean, acquaintance-wise, we probably have brush with a lot of people, and if we don't want to see someone, it is not really, really hard to arrange not to see them. There are how many Hy-Vees in the Quad Cities? Do you know what I mean?
Like
If you know someone shops at that Hy-Vee, and you don't want to see them, you could go shop at another Hy-Vee, or another Aldi, or whatever.
There's only
But Highbury is tiny. And she says this, they're being fixed, so absolutely fixed in the same place was bad for each, for all three, Mr. Elton, Harriet, and Emma. Not one of them had the power of removal or of effecting any material change of society. They must encounter each other and make the best of it.
the big problem with, I guess in the part of the book we read today, not today, this week, they don't see Mr. Martin a whole lot,
No,
but that's mainly because he's a lot lower than them.
yes,
But Mr. Elton is pretty close in class with.
yes. He
Emma.
he moves on the same level,
Mhm.
doesn't he?
Yeah.
They move, I mean, slightly lower, but they move, so is Miss Bates. But they move on a similar level, and so they're just stuck with each other. And I guess my,
They're seeing each other all the time.
yes, so I'm thinking back to March and April, when we spent maybe a lot more time with our, as being homeschooled, you tend to spend, more time with your families than kids that go to school every day, you know. So it's not that big a change, maybe, Jacob says no, for some people. But in general, would you agree with me that we're a society that if we have a falling out with someone, if there's an awkwardness, we just arrange not to be around that person
Yeah.
rather than deal with it, because we have the power of avoiding them.
It would be even easier in like a town that's bigger.
Yes, if we lived in Chicago, it would be very easy to avoid them. So, what does that do for our growth we're just talking about growing in virtue and character?
And perseverance.
It doesn't help it at all.
How can we make ourselves just deal with running is so easy. I'm talking about myself here too. I've had awkwardness with people. It's like, I will just arrange not to be where they are. It makes life a lot easier.
Yeah. And that's like our current culture, especially being our culture in this size of a city, it's awkward to arrange. Well, not really.
Bless you.
We don't see it's not like I see all my friends all the time, just around the city, but it's like, it would be kind of awkward to be like intentionally in a place that they are.
It's like when Harriet ran
Why are
into
you
the
here?
Martins.
Yeah.
You know, the Martins, and Highbury, like we said, it's like it's got 2 streets or something. I mean, it's not big. There's one store. If you want to go to the store, you risk seeing anybody else who might be in that town in that store. And I don't know, I just sometimes, life is easier in that respect for us, but maybe it doesn't make us
Happy.
as good a people because we don't have to deal with fallings out with people or awkwardness with people. We can just avoid them. You may. All right. Moving on. I have marked things that I thought were, I'm going to mention this. The Bateses. We met the Bates, Mrs. Bates and her daughter Miss Bates a little bit in the first week. This past week, you met them a little bit more.
Oh, they.
Miss Bates is, we read that paragraph last week where she loves everyone.
One more thing.
She just does not have any filter, we would say, you know, on her mouth, on her thoughts. She just, if it comes in her brain, she says it. And she just, but she's good-natured. She wouldn't insult anyone purposely for the world, you know. But she's difficult to be around just because of the words, the talking.
I'm
So,
listening to the audiobook, and the
Oh.
person who reads the book is
I
so
bet.
good at that. She makes Mrs. Bates sound so annoying. It's like,
It's Emma, it says this about Emma. She had had many a hint from Mr. Knightley, and some from her own heart, as to her deficiency. And it's the deficiency of visiting the Bateses. She owes visits to the Bateses. Emma is above them, slightly in social status. They've got a hard life. And that's what you do. You know, if you've got privilege, you use it for good. You attend to those less privileged. So she said she'd had hints from Mr. Knightley and from her own heart as to her deficiency. But none were equal to counteract the persuasion of its being very disagreeable, a waste of time, tiresome women.
it's like I
And
don't want to be there.
I don't want to be there. And all the horror of being in danger of falling in with the second rate and the third rate of Highbury, who were calling on them forever, and therefore she seldom went near them. What else is she afraid of happening at the Bateses?
Mrs. Bates is going to introduce her to people who are Mrs. Bates's class.
Yes, or lower. Or lower. Emma's going to be forced to mix at the Bateses. Not only does she have to listen to this,
She has to talk to them.
she has to talk to them, and then she has to be gracious to the people who are just below her. And I mean way, way below her.
I mean, it's good.
Like if these are the
gracious.
Bateses and this is Emma, then maybe the people might be that much below the Bateses that might come to call. Because everybody, this is a widow lady and her spinster daughter of not very good means, you know, not very affluent, and people feel sorry for them. And they know they like to have visits, so they come. And that ought to be the motivation, I suppose, you know.
Yeah,
Do you-
it's nice to be, like, I guess, generous, like you were saying, to visit the people that are below you, but, I mean, I guess, in a sense, God loves a cheerful giver, so it's kind of like, I mean, why are you giving if you don't? Why are you giving your time and your energy if you don't enjoy it?
Yes. They say charity comes from the heart. Is it God honoring to visit someone while you grit your teeth the whole time and say, I just want to get this over with?
Do all things without grumbling or complaining.
Yes. I mean, it's better, okay, I guess if we had to rate it, I'd say it's better to go and not enjoy it than not go at all.
In some
You know, but the
cases,
best would be go and say, I am right now doing a service to God. Jesus is in these people. I see Jesus in Miss Bates. Some people it's very hard to see Jesus in. Let's just be honest. Miss Bates was one of them for Emma. And she thinks she's in the clear. There will be no letter from Jane Fairfax. Wrong.
Because it's a Tuesday or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Don't
Jane
you-
doesn't write.
Don't you love the way that Miss Bates tells you everything that's in the letter and then reads the letter?
I like the one sentence at the end of the chapter where it's like, even though Emma heard everything that was in the letter, she never had to read the
Listen
letter
to
at
the
all.
letter herself. Yes, yes. So, Jane Fairfax. Why does Emma not like Jane Fairfax?
Because everyone thinks they should be together and she doesn't want to.
Why does she not
It's
take up?
stubbornness.
Why does she want to be best friends with Jane Fairfax?
It's
Well,
like-
because
Sorry, go ahead.
you go.
Well, it's just like expected. And I feel like when something's expected, even myself, like I'm guilty of that. If my parents are like, "Oh, this would be perfect," I'm like, "No, it wouldn't." Like if they wouldn't have said that, I probably would have thought, you know what, maybe this would be good. But
It's
because
almost-
we can
yeah.
be stubborn, it's like
Nobody wants to be
No.
set up in a
No.
friendship,
It's
an
stubbornness.
arranged friendship.
She's kind of like Emma, but better in a sense.
how-
Also
She's
the
Yes.
scene where she's trying to pry for information for Frank Churchill and she just refuses to tell.
And in the last line in that, I think, says she could never forgive her for not being open, for not giving her some
what
info.
she wants, which is what she's used to.
Yes, yes. Jane is so reserved. There's an interesting other take on it. It says Emma was sorry. She's sorry that Jane Fairfax is coming to spend 3 months. To have to pay civilities to a person she did not like through 3 long months. To be always doing more than she wished and less than she ought. Why she did not like Jane Fairfax might be a difficult question to answer. Mr. Knightley had once told her it was because she saw in her the really accomplished young woman, which she wanted to be thought herself.
So
She's Emma, only better.
Because whenever she plays the piano, Jane, she's just like everyone's like, "Oh, Jane," and then there's Emma, like, I hate her.
Yes.
Like she's talented.
And at one
She actually
point,
put it in the work while I kind of just never finished anything.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the deal with last week, like we were talking. She doesn't have the, I guess, stick-to-itiveness to keep on something and to really get good at something. Like with her paintings, she doesn't have like the determination to get good at something, and so now this is coming back to her, and in the form of Jane is like. She's the exact opposite.
yes.
They both have skill, but Jane applies her skill
Yes.
and makes it better.
Jane
But-
is not necessarily more talented. Jane has just done the hard work. There's one scene, they go to a social event and they both play, and it says that Emma was so disgusted with herself she went home and sat down and practiced for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Like that's gonna make up for
Years
months or
of
years
nothing.
of practice. And of course, is she gonna do that again the next day?
No.
No. One little spurt of practicing something or working on your Latin
Not
or
gonna make
whatever
you
isn't gonna
Mozart.
make it. What?
Just one spurt of practice is not gonna make you a Mozart.
No, it's not. Not at all. So they invite Jane.
And I can affirm that because I did take some piano lessons for a couple of years and then was not
any-
really enjoying it.
Anything we want to do well, we're gonna have to work at, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna take some sacrifice of time or effort or,
But at least I'm able to read piano notes.
good for you.
That's the-
And that's a good skill for everybody to have.
That's the whole question is the end result better of like knowing how to play the piano or knowing how to do this? Is that better than all the effort you have to put into it?
Mm-hmm. And the things that you're not doing,
Mhm.
which, watching TV or playing video games or, I don't play video games generally, but the watching TV part.
Constant struggle for Mrs. Ferguson.
Oh, I'm a gamer. I'm a secret gamer. My secret's, no, I'm just not. Although,
She has a Twitch.
a round of Age of Empires isn't bad, but I just like to gather resources. I don't want to fight. I like to build things and gather resources.
Oh my
I'm a
goodness.
peace-loving civilization. Okay, back to this.
Build things
They
and
they
do
invite
it.
Jane
Post
when
the
she
videos on
comes
Facebook.
and her aunt and her grandma to Hartfield. And they have a dinner. Mr. Knightley's there. And the next day, Mr. Knightley comes back and they're discussing the evening before. And Mr. Knightley says to her, "You left nothing undone. I was glad you made her play so much, for having no instrument at her grandmother's, it must have been a real indulgence."
So not only does like Jane play better, Jane doesn't have an instrument to practice while she's there.
While she's there.
It's like,
so Mr. Knightley praises Emma, and she says, "Well, I hope I'm not often deficient in what's due my guests." And of course, Mr. Woodhouse has to say, "Oh no, she's never deficient." "No," said Mr. Knightley, nearly at the same time, "you are not often deficient. Not often deficient, either in manner or comprehension. I think you understand me, therefore." And this is a hint between friends. I know you don't like Jane Fairfax, but you were very, very good to her last night. You know, well done. And Emma answers, it says, "An arch look expressed, 'I understand you well enough.' But she said only, 'Miss Fairfax is reserved.' I always told you she was, a little, but you will soon overcome all part of her reserve which ought to be overcome, all that has its foundation in diffidence. What arises from discretion must be honored." "You think her diffident. I do not see it." "My dear Emma," said he, moving from his chair into one close by her, "you are not going to tell me, I hope, that you had not a pleasant evening?" "Oh, no. I was pleased with my own perseverance in asking questions, and amused to think how little information I received." "I am disappointed," was his only answer. Why is Mr. Knightley disappointed in Emma? I am disappointed.
so self-centered.
And she was proud of the way she performed that night, just like in her actions, not the like company of other people, but it's about how she should always be, and so she was proud of the way she was
Yes.
that night.
But not how she made Jane feel.
No.
It's obviously she doesn't care about Jane's feelings.
Her reputation.
Her reputation.
That's right.
And Mr. Knightley's disappointed. But later down in the same page, Mr. Woodhouse breaks in. But Emma saw his anxiety, Mr. Knightley, and wishing to appease it, at least for the present, said with a sincerity which no one could question, "She is a sort of elegant creature that one cannot keep one's eyes from. I am always watching her to admire, and I do pity her from my heart." Mr. Knightley looked as if he were more gratified than he cared to express. That's what I want from you, Emma. That's the Emma I love. That's the Emma I know. That's the Emma I've seen grow up. That's the woman I want you to become. And he's proud of her because she thinks about someone else for a moment. Someone else's feeling. For a moment. You gotta start somewhere though, right? Okay, where is my next
Compassion +1.
mark? Oh, that's not, hang on guys. Boy, this was not, I don't have a lot of things noted here. Frank Churchill comes. Let's talk about Frank Churchill for a minute. Why does Mr. Knightley not like Frank Churchill? What's he got against him?
I couldn't really tell. I can't really tell at all.
Does anybody remember? He commented, they kind of had an argument once, him and Emma. Emma and Mrs. Weston talked about the same thing. Mr. Weston got married to Mrs. Weston, poor Miss Taylor. And his stepson, or no, it's not his step, his son has never come to visit his stepmother. And in that society, when you have a wedding even, a new bride in the family, everyone goes and pays their visits. This struck me, I don't know how familiar you guys are with A Christmas Carol. I'm sure you must have seen.
Finished reading it.
Okay, okay. I watch, there's a musical version called Scrooge that I watch on Christmas Eve every year. After we eat our big Christmas Eve meal and we eat our pie and cookies, then
We
I
actually
take
got to see.
Coco downstairs
I
and we
think
watch
there's
Scrooge.
we have an animated version at home.
And
we got
there's a
to-
scene which and it follows the story very closely. It's been some years since I've read the story, but you know his nephew, Scrooge's nephew, he's gotten married, and Scrooge has never gone to pay his respects to the bride. And so the way it's done in the musical anyway, when he is a renewed man on Christmas morning and he's going and he's distributing gifts and everything, he runs into his nephew and his wife and, you know, gives them a belated wedding gift from an old fool who regrets the Christmases he might have passed with you. This wasn't just meanness, it was a rude, like it was a breach of etiquette. You know, somebody got married and you didn't go visit the bride. So it's all that put together. He doesn't pay his respects to the bride. His dad got married, for crying out loud. You'd think he'd want to be at the wedding or meet his new stepmother, and he just has never come. And Mr. Knightley says, if he wanted to come, he could come. He's in his early 20s.
He uses his aunt as a
Yeah, he uses his aunt as an excuse. He's just a lazy, lacking in manners young man who doesn't know what he should do. Just he calls him a trifling, silly fellow, which is made much worse by the fact that he comes to visit and then he just takes off to London to get his hair cut
Yeah.
for a whole
16
day.
miles there. And
16 miles there and back on his horse. So Mr. Knightley is already ill-disposed. And have you noticed something about Emma? If somebody takes one side, she likes to take the other side. You know, when somebody
matter what.
argues for something, she kind of argues against
There
it.
was somewhere in this book, she was arguing with someone and she was like, she was liking the opposite side.
Yes,
but
she said she was taking the other
argue for
side.
it, though.
Yes, yes. So she's already predisposed to like Frank Churchill. She also happens to know something. Mrs. Weston and Mr. Weston kind of have an idea that Emma and Frank Churchill might be really good for each other. Right? Similar age, like it's kind of and Emma's doesn't expect herself to be interested. But she kind of is excited because she's going to be the center of attention. No, good Frank comes over, he's going to watch Frank and Emma and see how they react to each other. Well, the part I want to point out though, so remember, she's never laid eyes on this guy before. He comes to visit. The only thing she knows is that it's Miss Taylor's stepson now. That's the only connection, and she has the greatest regard for Miss Taylor, Mrs. Weston. That's it.
That's what they were talking about, like they used a different word, but just like a bias. Like of course I have a bias to like him. I like his mom, his stepmom.
Yes.
It's like, of course I have a bias.
Of course
to
I
like
do, and she admits it. But he comes, and they don't very quickly. Okay, they talk about various people there, and they start talking about Jane Fairfax. And, okay, so remember, so in case this wasn't clear, Jane Fairfax grew up with this girl in this Campbell household. Miss Campbell, member of the household. She was kind of adopted in. Miss Campbell has recently gotten married to a Mr. Dixon. All right, now she's Mrs. Dixon. And they've moved to Ireland. And for some reason, Jane Fairfax didn't want to go to Ireland to visit them. She also found out that Mr. Dixon once saved Jane from drowning. She almost fell overboard on a boat. Now, this girl who, remember, I'm not going to let my imagination run away with me ever again. She has built up this picture where she thinks Jane is ill and glum because she's secretly in love with Mr. Dixon. And Mr. Dixon was secretly in love with her, but it just couldn't be. And so she doesn't want to be near them, and she doesn't go to Ireland. She's built up this big romantic picture in her head of the supposed dashed hopes and romance of Jane Fairfax on the basis of nothing.
At the end of the story, though.
Well,
Hey.
no ends of stories. No ends of stories.
I won't tell the end of the story.
But here's the kicker. It's one thing to think this in her own head, it's another to take Frank Churchill in on it, and she almost immediately does. Says, they're talking about the Dixons. Poor Mrs. Dixon. Well, I'm glad she's gone to settle in Ireland. They were talking about the fact that Mr. Dixon used to like Jane's playing better than Mrs. Dixon's playing.
Isn't he like a music teacher or something?
I don't know.
Music fanatic?
But, oh yeah, he likes music, they just said. But they start to talk about this rumor. In other words, I'll put it in terms we understand. They're gossiping. They're gossiping about Jane Fairfax and Mr. Dixon. And she's gossiping with Frank Churchill, who she doesn't know from anybody. She's just been sucked into this relationship, and she's very free with her speculations. Emma is not behaving like a young lady's supposed to behave. I mean, frankly, that would be nasty if we did that today.
Especially
Like
after-
if you thought you knew a secret about someone, and you were speculating about something, marginally shameful, and you met someone, and you just happened to know them in common, and you just take them aside and start gossiping about it and speculating, that would be so rude. That's what Emma does with Frank Churchill.
Especially because after like what just happened, where she thought that Mr. Elton was in love with Harriet.
Yes. Her track record is not real good at this point, is it? Of pegging people's emotions, and as Karsten hinted, we are going to find out that she's way off base. Next week, maybe we should close the door. Okay.
Some lovely ambiance.
I think there's only one more thing I wanted to mention. Then I want to talk about what I want you guys to write this week. Let me see yes. These last two chapters. So, in the first section of the book, are you guys with me? In the first section of the book, it's all about Harriet and Mr. Elton. That ship has sailed. That's not happening. Now, we have a lot of swirling romances. Frank and Emma, right? Jane and Mr. Dixon, supposedly. And now, Mrs. Weston comes out with a new one. Jane and Mr. Knightley. Mr. Knightley is so nice. Mr. Knightley sent his carriage for her. Mr. Knightley always praises Jane. And Mrs. Weston says, I've thought that maybe Mr. Knightley's kind of got a thing for Jane. This is Emma's reaction. Mr. Knightley and Jane Fairfax? Exclaimed Emma. Dear Mrs. Weston, how could you think of such a thing? Mr. Knightley? Mr. Knightley must not marry. You would not have little Henry cut off from Donwell, his nephew, who would be his heir if he doesn't marry. Oh, no. Henry must have Donwell. I cannot at all consent to Mr. Knightley's marrying, and I am sure it is not at all likely. I am amazed that you should think of such a thing. Okay. Why is Emma so extremely enthusiastic about Mr. Knightley and Jane Fairfax not being a good idea?
Jealous.
Do you think Emma knows that she's jealous?
I don't know.
She probably hasn't figured it out yet because she is very smart but not very smart at the same time.
She is not very smart, and she's intelligent and clever, but she has no
But she doesn't use
sense of self. But she's not introspective at all. She doesn't read her own emotions. Yes, she seems very, very up in arms about Mr. Knightley not getting married to Jane Fairfax in particular, or anyone.
And also the idea that Jane's getting married before her, like everything
Oh,
before her.
that's true too.
So jealous again.
So we shall see how that plays out. Some of you already know how it plays out. One last comment, and then we will wrap up with, I want you to do just a short, sort of more creative writing thing this week. Just a little breather. Well, actually 2 weeks. I'm gonna give you.
Wait, we have 2
Not
weeks?
creative.
Yes, you have 2 weeks to do it.
I'm
Okay.
not
Okay.
creative.
No, you don't have to be that you have to be a little bit creative, not super creative. Okay, one last thing. They go to Ford's, and Harriet is shopping, and Harriet cannot for the life of her pick anything. She goes on and on and on. Oh, should I have it sent to Hartfield? Oh, should I have it sent to Mrs. Goddard's? Oh, I don't know.
And Emma's
Just
like,
make a decision already.
Emma's just like, send it to Hartfield.
Yes, and Harriet
Shut up.
is described this way: tempted by everything and swayed by half a word.
Yep.
It sums it up beautifully. Tempted by everything and swayed by half a word. And what worse friend could she have than Emma, who thinks she knows everything? Oh, no,
But is
you should
always
refuse Mr.
wrong.
Martin. Yes, but is always wrong.
Well,
But but my favorite quote from this book is in that same paragraph. Emma has to kill time because Harriet is just incessantly looking at stuff and can't make up her mind. And so she goes to look out the window because what else is she going to do, right? Yeah, well, no. It says, in Highbury, there's not much chance of seeing much exciting. But it says, when her eyes fell only on the butcher with his tray, a tidy old woman traveling homewards from shop with her full basket, 2 curs quarreling over a dirty bone, and a string of dawdling children round the baker's little bow window eyeing the gingerbread, she knew she had not reason to complain, and was amused enough, quite enough still to stand at the door. And then here's my quote: a mind lively and at ease can do with seeing nothing, and can see nothing that doesn't answer. A mind lively and at ease can do with seeing nothing, and can see nothing that doesn't answer. So, when's the last time you just sat? There's no TV, there's no radio, and you're just looking out the window. Or you're just sitting in a room. Yeah, for some people, never. A mind lively and at ease can do with seeing nothing, and can see nothing that doesn't answer. We don't live that way anymore. And do you guys know who Blaise Pascal is? Pascal's Wager, or maybe you've heard of Pascal. He's a mathematician, but also a philosopher. And he wrote a book called Pensées, and it wasn't really a book, it's more just like jotting down his thoughts. And Pensées means thoughts. Yeah, anything mathematical that's with Pascal, it would be this Pascal. And one of his thoughts was, all the troubles of the world arise from a man not being able to sit quietly in a room by himself. We don't like ourselves. We don't sit with ourselves. Anyway, I love this picture of Emma, with all her faults and everything. I mean, she doesn't live in a hub of activity, granted. But she can look out the window and, oh, there's a car, there's a cat. Like, that's good enough, because she has riches in her own mind. I like that. We shall have riches in our own minds. Okay. Here's what you're going to do for me this week. You're going to read through chapter 42. Only 2 more weeks of Emma. And then Moby Dick. Like in Moby Dick or not, it's going to be completely different. There's no women in Moby Dick at all. There's no social. Yeah, I guess. No social niceties, really, in Moby Dick. Just at the beginning, right? Have you read Moby Dick already? Oh, okay. I was gonna say, I want to find a book you haven't read. Oh, okay,
I've read
okay.
an abridged version. But it's like
And kids'
very
books.
short.
Okay. Here's what I'd like you to do. I don't know if you have noticed this or not, but when you read a Jane Austen book, when you read this book, she doesn't really describe anything. Like, women might have a fair face or a fine figure, a good complexion. Like, there's a mention of Harriet's height at one point. She doesn't describe anything. We have no idea what any of these people look like. We have no idea what Hartfield looks like. We just don't know. This was not important to Jane Austen. I want to read a couple of her descriptions of people to you. These are my green tabs. Okay, this is Mr. Woodhouse. His spirits required support. He was a nervous man, easily depressed, fond of everybody that he was used to, and hating to part with them, hating change of every kind. Okay, that's all we hear about Mr. Woodhouse at that point. We never know what he looks like.
We kind of hear people described by the way they act.
Yes, so let me, before you comment, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going for, but let me read the others. Mr. Weston was a native of Highbury and born of a respectable family, which for the last 2 or 3 generations had been rising into gentility and property. He had received a good education, but on succeeding early in life to a small independence, had become indisposed for any of the more homely pursuits in which his brothers were engaged, and had satisfied an active and cheerful mind and social temper by entering into the militia of his country, then embodied. Mrs. Goddard was the mistress of a school, not of a seminary or an establishment or anything which professed in long sentences of refined nonsense to combine liberal acquirements with elegant morality upon new principles and new systems, and where young ladies for enormous pay might be screwed out of health and into vanity, but a real honest old-fashioned boarding school where a reasonable quantity of accomplishments were sold at reasonable price. Okay, that sounds like about her school. That's not about Miss Goddard at all. Okay, Harriet Smith was the natural daughter of somebody. Somebody had placed her several years back at Mrs. Goddard's school, and somebody had lately raised her from the condition of scholar to that of parlor boarder. This was all that was generally known of her history. She had no visible friends but what she had acquired at Highbury, and was just now returned from a long visit in the country to some young ladies who had been at school there. Like Carson said, we hear what they do, or we hear their histories, but we don't hear anything to speak of about their physical appearance. Here's your assignment. You have 2 weeks to do it, but please don't just not do anything this week, all right? I want you to choose 3 people. I don't care if they're real people or not real people. They can be characters from movies. They can be your next door neighbor. They can be anybody, real or imaginary. And I want you to write a descriptive paragraph about each of them in the style of Jane Austen. I want you to look at the way, I mean, I read those, turn to anywhere in the book where she introduces someone. Jane Fairfax was, the daughter of, I want you to see if you can, what, just a paragraph, probably at least 4 sentences each.
So it can be anyone, like people you know, characters from a book.
Anybody. See if you can make it sound like Jane Austen sounds. Do you understand what I mean by that? Mm-hmm. Sort of that. Luke Skywalker was an abandoned child taken in by his aunt and uncle, operating the, moisture farm on Tatooine.
He wasn't really abandoned.
He wasn't really abandoned. He was
Kind of.
His father didn't know about him,
yeah,
and then his mother died.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I would
Left,
still call that abandoned.
desiring adventure, but thwarted at every turn by his Uncle Owen. He longed for adventure and excitement, but was keenly intent on performing his duties to his uncle. You see what I'm going with this, okay?
It's like, it's not about them, it's about everything else around them.
It's not about them, it's about everybody's relationship to them and their relationship to other people, either horizontally or like into the past, their parents or grandparents or whatever. Yes. So see if you can choose 3 and just have fun with it. Try to have fun. You've written all these essays. Should Frankenstein have a second monster? Antithesis and Tale of Two Cities. Let's do something fun, all right? If we don't love the book, let's at least do something fun.
Paper is fun.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Here, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. See you guys next week, hopefully.